In the mid-1860s, Fyodor Dostoevsky already counted as one of Russia's best-known writers. His books carried weight, his name drew attention, and his ideas stirred people up. But fame did not mean safety. Money kept slipping away faster than it came in. Old obligations lingered, new bills appeared, and the numbers never seemed to add up. He lived on the edge of solvency, and that edge kept crumbling. Work should have been the solution, but writing did not pay like a steady job. Payments arrived late or arrived smaller than he hoped, and every delay tightened the pressure. He tried to plan, but he also reacted, taking advances, juggling promises, stretching future income to cover today's costs. Each patch created another weak spot. His finances became a chain of short-term fixes. And then temptation offered something that looked faster than literature. Gambling entered not as a hobby, but as an emergency tool he kept reaching for. At first, it seemed like a way to catch up, to turn one lucky moment into breathing room. Instead, it brought the opposite. Losses arrived hard and quickly, and winning only pulled him back for another round. The habit started to shape his choices. Now his livelihood depended not just on writing, but on surviving his own risky impulses. The gambling stopped being an occasional risk and became a pattern he could not outrun. He won just enough, often enough, to believe the next visit would fix everything. Then the losses returned, larger and faster, and each one demanded another attempt to recover it. What had felt private turned public the moment money ran out. Creditors waited, promises piled up, and the roulette table kept pulling him back. Debt began to shape his days more than his ideas did. He calculated not what he wanted to write, but what might sell quickly and when. Letters and meetings turned into negotiations for time, for advances, for mercy. He borrowed against work that did not yet exist, then watched the interest grow while he tried to produce it. Even small expenses started to feel dangerous, because every coin had an owner already. The pressure stayed constant. Soon the crisis reached his writing in a blunt, practical way. He needed cash before the next deadline, before the next demand, before the next humiliation. That urgency narrowed his choices. Longer projects became impossible luxuries, and careful planning collapsed into short-term survival. He tried to work while carrying the weight of what he owed, but the debt kept interrupting, redirecting, rushing him. It stopped being background noise. It ran the schedule. The pressure stopped being only personal and became legal. A publisher came forward with an offer that looked like a lifeline, quick cash, paid now. Dostoevsky took it because he needed it, but the money arrived with strings attached, and they tightened fast. The contract demanded a full new novel on a deadline so short it barely sounded possible. The fine print turned the deal into a trap. If he missed the date, the punishment was not a simple fee. He risked losing control of his future work, meaning the next books could earn him nothing when he needed income most. That changed everything. It was no longer about writing when inspiration arrived. It was about beating a clock. Now every day carried a clear consequence. Write fast enough, and he kept the chance to recover. Fail, and he handed his future to other people. The contract boxed him in from all sides. Debt behind him, deadlines ahead, penalties waiting at the finish line. There was no safe pause, no slow revision. Speed became his only bargaining power. The deadline kept shrinking, and his usual method simply did not fit the clock. Writing meant drafting, crossing out, rewriting, and losing days he no longer had. So Dostoevsky made a hard, practical move. He hired a young stenographer named Anna Snitkina. She did not arrive as a muse. She arrived as a tool for speed. Her skill turned spoken words into pages, fast. Stenography worked because it separated thinking from handwriting. Dostoevsky could push forward in long bursts, dictating scenes as they formed, while Anna captured them in a clean, usable script. Then the text could be copied and prepared for submission without waiting for his slow, exhausting pen work. It was not comfortable. It was controlled urgency. Every hour gained meant one less hour lost. A system took shape almost immediately. He dictated, she wrote, the pages piled up, and the story advanced by force of routine. What had taken months could now be compressed into days, not by inspiration, but by logistics. The pressure did not ease, but it became manageable, almost measurable. With Anna beside him, Dostoevsky finally had a way to outrun the deadline instead of chasing it. The deadline did not slow down, and neither did the debts. He used the new routine to dictate for hours, pushing past exhaustion because the alternative meant losing everything he still hoped to earn, and he did not hide from what drove him there. He took the worst part of his life, the gambling, and forced it onto the page, scene by scene, as if naming it made it controllable. The story he produced cut close to the bone. It followed the logic of roulette, the way he knew it in his body, the rush, the false certainty, the sudden collapse. He turned his own humiliation into plot, not to confess, but to explain the trap. Each dictated section tightened the connection between obsession and ruin. The more honestly he wrote it, the faster it moved, because he already knew the ending. Day after day, the manuscript grew into a complete novel with no room for second thoughts. He relied on speed and accuracy, correcting what he could, but never stopping long enough to lose momentum. The pressure stayed constant, but the work reached a finish line. He completed The Gambler as a fully formed manuscript, a direct confrontation with the roulette table fixation that had been emptying his pockets and shrinking his choices. He finished the manuscript, but finishing it was not the same as surviving the contract. The deadline still mattered, and the publisher still held the power to twist any mistake into a failure. Dostoevsky needed proof, not promises. So he treated the delivery like one more wager, not at a roulette table, but inside paperwork and procedure. He moved fast, because one missed step could have erased the entire victory. The obvious move was to hand the pages directly to the publisher, get a receipt, and walk away safe. But that path depended on cooperation, and cooperation was not guaranteed. If the office refused to accept the manuscript or delayed the paperwork, the deadline could still be declared missed. Dostoevsky went for a workaround that produced an official timestamp anyway. He forced the record to exist, even without the publisher's help. That single procedural move changed everything. It locked in the fact that the manuscript arrived on time, and it stripped away the easiest way to sabotage him. The contract's worst penalty did not land. He did not lose control of his future work, and he did not surrender years of earnings to someone else's terms. For a man drowning in debt, this was not a technicality. It was his lifeline to keep writing for himself. After the deadline crisis passed, the working partnership did not simply end. It shifted. Dostoevsky relied on Anna not just for speed, but for steadiness, and that closeness turned into marriage. It changed what his life looked like day to day. He no longer faced every problem alone, improvising from one emergency to the next. Now there was a shared plan, and a shared will to enforce it. Marriage did not erase his debts, but it changed how they got handled. Anna managed the household with discipline and kept track of what came in and what went out. She dealt with creditors directly, so Dostoevsky did not have to burn hours pleading, bargaining, and panicking. That work mattered. Each confrontation she took on protected his time and protected his nerves, and it turned chaos into a schedule. With Anna guarding the practical side of life, Dostoevsky regained something he had been losing for years: routine. Writing stopped being a frantic last resort and started becoming a daily obligation he could actually meet. The alliance worked because it was unequal in the right way. He produced pages. She defended the conditions that made pages possible. Together, they created a small, hard barrier between his work and the people demanding payment. Marriage did not end the danger. It only changed the stakes. Away from home, the old pattern returned fast. A little hope, a bigger bet, then a sudden loss that wiped out what they needed for rent, food, and travel. Abroad, the roulette tables felt like an escape from pressure, but they created new pressure even faster. The debts followed them across borders, and the panic returned with them. Each relapse forced a hard question. Who controlled the money, and who controlled the urge? He promised himself he could stop after one win, but the wins only pulled him back. Anna did not treat it like a moral failure. She treated it like a practical emergency. She tracked what they owed, counted what remained, and pushed for rules that removed easy access to cash. The problem had to become manageable, or it would become fatal. That pressure produced a turning point. He committed to breaking the cycle, not with willpower alone, but with a new system built around accountability. Anna took charge of payments, set limits, and kept money out of reach when temptation rose. He accepted that structure even when it felt humiliating because the alternative had already been proven. Gradually, the losses stopped multiplying. They began rebuilding control, one decision at a time. After the worst chaos eased, the work changed. He no longer wrote like a man sprinting away from creditors. He wrote like a builder laying down foundations. With Anna controlling the practical mess, payments, schedules, letters, his mind stayed on the page for longer stretches. That shift mattered. The same intensity that once fed panic now fed structure. Big books stopped feeling impossible and started feeling like a plan. The result showed quickly. He produced late novels that did not sound rushed, even when deadlines still existed. He worked in larger arcs, returned to themes, and pushed ideas farther than he had dared when every week felt like a collapse. Earlier suffering did not disappear, but it stopped owning the process. It became material he could control. The debt-driven speed turned into sustained drive. He wrote to shape meaning, not just survive. That steady output changed his position in the culture around him. He stopped being a talented writer constantly in trouble and became a public force people argued over and took seriously. Each major book increased his authority and widened his audience, which meant more readers, more security, and more leverage. Stability created work. The work created influence, and influence, in turn, protected the next book from being written in pure desperation. In the end, the debts stopped mattering, even though they once controlled everything. What lasted was the writing. Today, Dostoevsky was remembered around the world for books that stayed in print, crossed borders, and kept finding new readers. Crime and Punishment kept getting reread as a deep test of guilt and conscience. The Brothers Karamazov kept being treated as one of the biggest novels ever written. Against those giants, The Gambler sat differently. It carried the stamp of an emergency, not a long, careful plan. It showed what happened when an artist got cornered by money and by his own habits and still produced something sharp and honest. It was shorter, it moved faster, it felt tied to a specific moment because it was. It was literature made under threat, and it never hid that. That contrast became the final twist. The man from the beginning of this story had lived like the next payment could decide his future, like every loss could erase his career. But time reversed the power. Creditors disappeared. Deadlines vanished. Roulette spins meant nothing. The pages stayed. The desperate writer became a permanent name, and the crisis book he forced into existence became proof that pressure did not only break him,